Hey guys, welcome to Casper Chess. Today I have something so special for you guys. I'm talking about a new system to play against the queen's pawn game. So last year I remember showing you something in the lines of the O'Sullivan Gambit where you may confuse every d4 player like this, e.g. after d4, you simply start with the Polish defense. By the way, most of you guys who are looking for a simple weapon against d4, especially in classical tournaments, try the Polish defense. But this is not what this video is all about. I just want to lay a foundation before I show you one exciting system to use against d4. So usually, white players tend to go back to e4 as you can see in the master's database, which is one beauty. And it's in this position where you can play knight f6, saying, take my flank pawn and I'm gonna take your important central pawn. So by this time, most of your opponents will play e5 attacking your knight, after which you go knight d5. And what you're doing here is indirectly sacrificing your b pawn, which they are going to take. By the way, bishop takes b5 is the top played move. And without even realizing it, it turns out all of a sudden you are playing the Alekhine defense or O'Sullivan Gambit, where we go pawn to c5 in this position. And the idea is, if pawn takes, now you go queen a5 check, and there's nothing that white can do about this. You're going to win a free piece on the next move, either the bishop or the knight. For example, if they play knight c3, you can simply take that knight while attacking the queen, and after they take back, well, that's when you take back the bishop. Again, this is not what this video is all about. I'm just trying to lay a foundation. And speaking of this position where you play knight d5, if at all any of you guys are doubting that this is the Alekhine defense, well, it's like white started with pawn to e4, and then we played knight f6 attacking the pawn, and then they played e5, then we go knight d5, and after pawn to d4, it's like this is when we played b5, sacrificing our pawn, so that after bishop takes, this is when we played pawn to c5. So same transposition, we're just talking of the same thing. And this is the first method you may use to confuse your d4 opponents. But you know, this is too risky and mostly suitable for attacking players like myself. I mean, people like me who don't mind losing quickly. So in today's video, there is this new system that I want to teach you guys, where white begins with d4 and then you start with pawn to d5. By the way, if white doesn't play pawn to c4 on the second move, the move I recommend is pawn to c5 against any of these highlighted moves. In other words, if white doesn't play the queen's gambit, you play the reverse queen's gambit yourself. That will be great. But the moment they play pawn to c4, what I recommend you do, whether in blitz, rapid, or in serious classical chess, is to take on c4. You accept the gambit as though you want to play the queen's gambit, right? And this is when most people will be prompted to play pawn to e4. You know, just taking up the center, because next they want to recapture on c4 with their bishop. And this is when you play knight f6, ladies and gentlemen, attacking the central pawn. The top played move in the master's database is pawn to e5 in this position, after which you go knight d5. See what you're doing? You are simply trying to change the structure of the queen's pawn game, confusing a d4 player. This is something that most of them have never seen before. So look at this. The top played move here is bishop takes c4, both in the master's database and in the Lichess database. So let's go with that. Bishop takes c4, which also attacks our knight, right? You have an option to go knight b6 if you want, but the move I recommend here is to go bishop f5. And see, this is no longer the queen's gambit accepted. If you ask any top coach, this is the central variation Alekhine system against d4. That's the difference. Your simple plan will be to go pawn to e6, develop your dark squared bishop on e7 or on b4, depending on the situation. You go knight c6, or even pawn to c6 if you want, then knight d7, and then castle short. Simple stuff, then you continue playing chess. Now look at this. In this position, the top played move is knight c3. Once you see this move, knight c3, you don't want to take. Very important to remember, because if you do so, you may run into this tactic pop queen b3, targeting your b7 pawn and your f7 pawn. I'm not saying this is the best move, but just keep in mind that in some variations, white has this move, queen b3. So whenever you see knight c3, the move you want to play is knight b4. And next you are going to give a check, making white lose his right to castle just like that. There is no clean defense for white in this position. They have to find this theoretical move, pawn to e6, which is hard for a human opponent to see. Pawn to e6. But even after this move, you can just, take back. That's all. And see how impossible this variation is, you guys. Again, white has to find this stockfish move, pawn to g4. I mean, who plays like this in the queen's pawn game? So you're not going to see these things happening. Okay, let's just say white plays pawn to g4. Again, you can just go bishop c2 here, attacking the queen. Say queen e2 is played. Well, now you are just going to take the pawn on d4. This won't be a normal game, but one full of tactics. If a3, you can just, play bishop c2 and knight c2 check next. Again, after knight c3, I recommend going knight b4. This time queen b3 doesn't even work because you can simply play pawn to e6, defending your knight, and they are not going to be able to capture the b7 pawn. If they play pawn to a3, worse off, their queen will be trapped, just like that. For example, you can just go bishop c2 and that's it. So that's why you need to play knight b4 instead of taking the knight on c3. Again, after knight c3, I recommend going knight b4, and this time let's say white plays the top played move, queen a4 check. After this, you can simply go knight ac8, supporting your other knight on b4. White will play pawn to d5, thinking they are going to win some material here, but this is worse. First of all, there is this move knight c2 check, which you can play, that's fine. You're going to win a rook, but the move I recommend here after pawn to d5 is this tactical move, pawn to a6. The thing is, if white takes your knight, planning to take the second knight, now this is when you go knight c2 check, and Stockfish says the best that white can do here is to give up his queen, which is better. But if they play something like king e2, the top played move in the Lichess database, this is when you play pawn to b5 with tempo. They can't take with ampersand. So if they do this, for example, you can simply take back. That's just a free piece, and you're also attacking the queen. Worse off, the queen is almost trapped. If queen takes b5, you can simply go knight d4 check and win that queen. Anyways, if white tries to play this desperado move, bishop takes f7 check, you simply take, that's no problem. If they rescue their queen like this, queen b3 check, you don't want to block with the bishop because they are going to take your knight. So you play pawn to e6, blocking the check, and then you are threatening to mate in one. For example, if they play knight f3 in this position, you can simply go queen d3 checkmate. All these highlighted squares are covered by your pieces. And instead of knight f3, let's say white plays bishop e3. Again, you can just go queen d3 check, and it's just a matter of time before you checkmate your opponent. Maybe you can even play something like bishop g4 here, bishop g4 check, sacrificing your bishop, because if they take, you have all sorts of moves, but I like pawn to h5. If king f3, this is when you go knight d4 check. So let's say white plays king g3. Now you go queen g6 check, and on the next move you're going to mate your opponent probably like this. So you have two options, either to go knight b6 or play my favorite tactical move, knight b4, intending to give a check. Don't take the knight on c3. Don't ever do that in this particular system. So you can also go knight b6 if you want, and then if they play queen b3, you simply go pawn to e6 and begin playing your Alekhine defense. By the way, they can't even play queen b3 due to, queen takes d4 in the near future after playing pawn to e6. And before I show you some more and more interesting stuff, allow me to thank all of my patrons and all of you guys who purchased my new E5 defense course, which is now complete, obviously, which teaches you how to beat the Scotch, the Italian game, the Bishop's opening, the Vienna game, and other minor openings under E4. So we just finished looking at this knight c3 line. Let's look at something else. Instead of knight c3, what if white plays the immediate queen b3 in this position? Let's look at this. Well, this is a bit tricky, but the pawn you want to save is the f7 pawn. Losing the b7 pawn won't be much of a stretch. Besides, look at the master's database, you guys. You will see many victories in this position for black. So just think of saving your f7 pawn. Start with pawn to c6, and after they take, you take back. If they take your pawn on b7 first before taking your knight, this is even worse because you can try to trap their queen like this, pop, while attacking the light squad bishop. See how good this is. And again, white has to find this computer move, pawn to e6. Otherwise, if white plays something like bishop b3, you simply have bishop c8 and the queen is trapped. So in other words, we may refer to the b7 pawn as a poisoned pawn. So white must not take on b7 first. They just have to start with bishop takes d5 and then allowing you to take back like this. If white takes, you're going to take back like this. And it looks like they are going to walk away with a free pawn after capturing on b7, also attacking your rook, right? The only move you just don't want to play is knight d7 because you're going to lose your pawn. But the simplest you can do here is going for a queen exchange like this. Queen c8, they can't take your rook because they are going to lose everything. So after queen takes c8, this is when you take back with your light squad bishop. Say after knight c3, you simply go pawn to e6. Your development is very fast. They may play f4, but you can simply go knight c6 in this position, attacking the d4 pawn. After knight f3, defending their pawn, you can even play something like bishop a6, say king f2. All this is theory, guys, and it has been played at the top level. You can check in the master's database. One interesting game is where black played king d7 in this position, and after rook d1 was played, black played bishop e7 connecting the rooks. And yes, it looks like white is up a pawn for the time being, but look at how open our queen side is, as if we are playing the Benko Gambit. And this is why Stockfish gives an equal position here. White is not winning, neither are you losing. Anyways, in fact, there is another line where they take on d5 and then you take back, and after queen takes b7, instead of going queen c8 to oversimplify everything and continue playing the Benko, especially in rapid and blitz, you may also try the following line, starting with pawn to e6. Yes, sacrificing your rook like this, and then go queen b6, caging white's queen like this. There's no escaping, by the way. And so if they play something like knight c3, for example, maybe intending to go knight a4 or whatever, this is when you can go bishop b4, pinning that knight. And say after pawn to a3, well, you simply take with check, and after pawn takes, here you can simply castle short. And if they go rook b1, you're just gonna take. So you're just one move away from winning white's queen. Maybe rook a2 is a nice try. They're going to play rook b2, right? But even here, the best you can do is just to go queen b1 and you're doing fine, right? Once again, if you just want to play standard chess, you can continue with the Alekhine, go knight b6, bishop a5, pawn to e6, and play a balanced game. That's up to you. Last line before I end this video. So after c4, the trick is to start with the queen's gambit accepted, waiting for pawn to e4 to come, so that you can now transpose the game into the Alekhine with knight f6, inviting pawn to e5, which most of your opponents will play. And then you go knight d5. By the way, I'm not just making up these stuff, you guys. Check the master's database. Masters do play these things. So you go knight d5. And then after bishop takes, you simply go bishop a5. Question: what do you do if white doesn't play knight c3, which we already looked at, or queen b3, which we also looked at? What if they play a traditional move, knight f3? Well, simple answer, you just continue playing your normal Alekhine with pawn to e6. Your bishop is already out. This time, if they even play something like queen b3, you know, targeting the b7 pawn, if you want to avoid tactics, you can just go knight b6. Next, you will play something like bishop e7 and castle short. Pawn to d5 is ridiculous. You can just take the bishop. But if you want to try out something fun, after queen b3, instead of going knight b6, again you can go into tactics with the move knight c6 here, offering white to take your pawn. For example, after queen takes b7, you now go knight db4, and white's queen is almost trapped once again. White has to find this stockfish move, the only accurate move, bishop b5. Otherwise, moves like knight a3 in an effort to stop knight c2 check runs into rook b8. Now in my next video, I'm going to show you other responses by white, like what happens if they don't play pawn to e4. For example, after accepting the queen's gambit, what do you do if they play pawn to e3? Can you still play the knight f6 Alekhine system? What next? So that will be a study for another day, and that's why you have all the reasons to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification icon so that you don't miss any of my future uploads. Right, now time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Ruy Lopez, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.